what about the magic show again?
Oh, the magic show.
Oh, magic show.
Yes, Gus Grissom. Everybody went to Disney down there. I mean, when they started with Disney and they're using Woody Woodpecker and everything else, and they were doing all the introduction to the first rockets and everything like that, yep. Right? They used Disney because they needed their video, they needed their animation, and they needed their magic. And of course, Gus Grissom was the first guy to demonstrate a magic trick by putting a lemon and having it look like it right through it on a coat hanger. He was the first one to do that. And I mean, by the 1960s, NASA had developed their own studios, Downey Studios and everything else, the largest studios in the world, as a matter of fact. And what do you have? You have another magic show because all of the astronauts were magicians. Gus started it with his little magic trick, and then he said, now you can hear me between two buildings, and now I can't. Sometimes you see the stars, sometimes you can't. It's just a magic show. It appears and it disappears again. The entire Apollo project had to train these astronauts as magicians. Looks like they're on the moon, but they're not. Schrodinger's cat, is it alive or dead? Is it in the box or is it not?
Yes, and rocks tend to be very inanimate objects, which you can decide where they came from by just deciding. You know, Antarctica would be a good place.
Do they have moisture in them, or don't they? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Do they have a radioactive signature? No, they're just like Earth, right? The rocket goes through the clouds. Where did it go after that? It's a magic show. Up in a cloud of smoke.
Yeah, it is. That's a good way of saying it. It's just a magic show. And we all fell for it, even though we know how magic shows work. We like magic shows. We also like to understand how it's done. Sometimes we can't. I mean, David Copperfield flying, that was a pretty good trick, that one. He wasn't flying, it was a magic show. But he appeared to be flying. He even carried a girl up with him. Wonderful. And we all fell for it. We thought, what a wonderful magician. And then we watched people walking around on the moon, and we thought, wow, this is a magic show. Isn't it wonderful? How did they do it? We know how they did it. But you don't want to explain magic tricks to people. It stops the magic.
People stop coming to the show.
That's a good point.
And when they stop coming to the show, if they stop coming to the museum, the money stops.
Ah, now, but they've got a new show being planned. It's called Return to the Moon. That will convince us that they got there the first time, because they're going to return to the moon. Doesn't mean to say they got there the first time. Just means they're trying to do it again. But now we're all watching, and we know what to look for, and we're not so naive as to believe that if NASA says something, it's the truth. Because as NASA stands for never a straight answer, we got to look for the non-straight answers coming out of NASA.
It could be just the Carbonaro effect. You have to watch Michael Carbonaro. He's a magician.
Very skilled magicians and artists who can trick you into believing something that isn't true. And NASA are past masters of that.
If you put on the big show, and the Saturn V rocket was the largest, most powerful launch, earth-shattering. I mean, shake your ribs. You're 10 kilometers away as you're closest viewing to it. And watching and listening to that thing, 134 decibels when you're 10 kilometers away from the thing. I mean, it's just shaking your bones and you're watching that thing going up in a big fireball, right? For them to do that was a tremendous feat.
It certainly got our attention, didn't it?
But that lasted for 2 minutes and 42 seconds. And then it's out of fuel. And then the other two stages are just enough to get it away from the cloud so it can go land in the ocean. And of course, they were controlling the air and sea space. So nobody else was there, right? Wherever that thing fell down, they were in control of that. Simple as that.
There's still no answer from anybody as to what that command module, the Apollo command module, was doing floating in the Atlantic, being recovered by the Soviet Navy in the Bay of Biscay. But nobody's prepared to say so, are they?
There was nobody on board?
No.
I've read every report that I can get my hands on about that article. There's two big ones, and one of them has got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, there's all these articles on it, right? And then you click on it and it drops down and everything you want to know, except where it came from. Now, did it come off a ship? Did it fall off a ship? Was it pushed off a ship? Was it pushed out the back of a plane with parachute? Nobody can tell you that.
If it's just a test machine that they were practicing with, throw some parachutes on it and it landed and they couldn't get it back again, and somebody else picked it up.
And anybody who wants to go and see that capsule that we're talking about is on display in Michigan, the Grand Rapids Museum. But it's all locked up. You can't see inside it. What was the filmmaker who was trying to measure the diameter of
James Collier. Yeah, they wouldn't let him in. He wanted to measure that up there.
Yeah, because if he'd been able to measure it, he would have been able to demonstrate.
He would have seen it wasn't there.
Yeah. So they couldn't let him see it.
They couldn't let him see that there was no hatch inside of there.
I don't know if that was the original capsule that he went into or if it was a replica.
No, that was Apollo 11.
Is it the Air and Space Museum?
Yeah.
No wonder the curator wouldn't let him near it. They had the cherry picker out for it, and as soon as he wanted to measure it down, it came.
They wouldn't let him get close enough to even look inside up that far. They got him up to the door on the side and then wouldn't let him go in there and measure it. It's because, quite physically, that top hatch would not be there. That just has a steel plate on it, and you can see it today. But it's also in the images when you see it landing. Any of the ones parachute when they're hitting the water just has a steel plate. One of them, when they're recovering, it actually has a canvas over the top. And that has to have that. It has to have that hatch has to be there.
If it was the real hatch, it would actually be quite a complex piece of mechanism. Because when the lunar module came together with the command module, it had to lock together.
Right, and the drogue had to fit in there too.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite a complex piece of mechanism that they would have had in there.
Somebody's going and restoring all these videos and sticking them out there. And I'm looking up at the top, and I all of a sudden see this light spinning around up at the top of the frame in the middle, and you only see it for a very short period of time, and then it's gone.
Right above that question mark there's a light, and it actually kind of looks like it spins.
Yeah, there's something out there.
See, as the hose is moving, so is it. So there has to be something up here that light's reflecting on. We thought it was the shadow from this thing reflecting on here, but it isn't because the sun's coming this way.
Show him the shadow on the outside of his elbow there. See it go up and down his arm on the hose? So the light's coming in horizontally across to his body. So now look at the deck down at the bottom at the front. The light is coming straight down off the hose and putting the shadow right on the deck. Two different angles. Now, take a look at the bottom of his feet back there. Now there's light coming up from underneath as well.
Watch when his foot goes behind. It's still lit.
Well, it's his feet. There's light coming up from underneath. There's light coming from the side and light coming straight down.
What it appears to be, the main light appears to be coming over his left shoulder.
Horizontally across.
This is all lit up here. Like everything's lit. So why is that in shadow? That's what I don't quite understand.
It's magic. It's part of the magic show.
Yeah, it's more of the magic show, all right.
Because you've got some quite skilled technicians out there who can illuminate things so that you can see what you're supposed to see, i.e. an astronaut, but they can illuminate his feet as well, and on top of his boots. So where's that light coming from?
It's just multiple lighting.
The whole thing's lit up and yet there's a shadow here.
That's behind the main light that's hitting right at his elbow, right? That hose that's running out there shows the direction right onto his elbow, right? It goes up and down there.
Oh, and by the way, remember then we took a look at the camera that this is being filmed from. So we just had a look to see if that might be up here, might have been a reflection off of the lens.
There is a camera up there, isn't there? On the journal site, there's only 4 photographs from magazine 152.
Okay.
So I went to March to the Moon, and there's over 50 photographs.
Wow.
And 152 is the Hasselblad camera that they were taking the still photographs of this spacewalk. So some of them are shot, there's 40 or 50 of them on the moon, but there's at least 15 that are shooting the astronaut while he's doing the spacewalk. 152, of course, that is Apollo 17, that magazine. You don't see any in 16 and 15. You don't see a magazine shooting a Hasselblad camera out there. So they're this far away from the moon before they start shooting the EVA. And these are the shots that are not on the journal site. So there's 30 shots in total of them of doing the EVA.
So then that's the camera taking that picture that the astronaut was poking his head out of the door.
Yeah. The other camera is up on a post above them.
There's nothing up above that camera for that reflection to be showing. That's what got me.
Now this is interesting. See the blur? Everything is perfectly fine. Come up, you're going to get a reflection out of the helmet and the entire photograph is blurred.
Now remember, if these guys are inside of a pool underneath the water, their heads are going to look shrunken inside of the suit.
Yeah. But the 3 photographs right there where you could get a reflection off the helmet are completely blurred out.
If you could see the heads through the visor, I mean, then you'd be able to tell if they were underwater because, again, the heads would look shrunk.
Yeah, but the funny thing is we know where the video camera is, the TV camera that so-called was shooting it, right? We know the angle is coming at because we just watched the video. And there's the camera. But it shows up in more of them. That's it right up there above his head. That CERN there, that's the front of his helmet and his mask. That camera is right up there behind him. And he never went that way out on the thing because that's shooting from the other side of the hatch. And here's the other thing, is the Earth is getting smaller. Like that's it right there.
Yeah, look at that. When it's on the side of the moon, you can see the crescent and it's quite sized.
I already showed you that we're a good distance away from the moon coming back towards the Earth before they started this sequence. And now this is the Earth right there.
It's a very small Earth if they're halfway back towards it. I mean, compare the size of the Earth there to the size of the moon that was in some of the previous images. The moon is quite large. Technically, the Earth should be 3.66 times the size of the moon, relatively speaking.
They've just got it wrong. It's just the movie magic that gets bigger, it gets smaller. We're back into, now you see it, now you don't.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Magic stuff. Oh, it's wonderful.
When we're discussing the Apollo 17, the shadow difference in the lengths, the sun angle changes a half degree an hour, I think.
Yeah, I think that's about right. It's 180 degrees in 14 days. So if you've got 180 degrees, sun from horizon to horizon, 180 degrees, in 14 days, it's just less than 10 degrees a day.
The problem is with that shadow difference in length there, because they're almost 75 degree difference in angle, looking at the difference on that, and they're there for 3 days, and that can't possibly be. It can't be that much.
12.86 degrees per day on the moon. That's the change. So total change is 38.6 degrees.
With their landing and everything else and takeoff, they're about 35 degrees total EVA time on the ground. That is 60 to 75 degree difference in angle change on there, and the only thing you can't lock down on that shadow is the magazine is showing EVA 1 and 3, and you don't know which photographs from which. That's where the problem is with that.
You'd think an astronomer would be able to understand all this, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, you can't allow for that for reflections and stuff. You do realize that Galileo, when he was looking through a telescope, it's the images he saw. In today's world, they're being computer generated. And it's the person that designs the software that's translating what the images that is being captured, what it translates into. And now that's what he's seeing. And now it's just the same as going through movie magic. Let's take the pillars of creation and let's enhance them and colorize the hell out of them so they look incredible. But the raw image doesn't look like that. That's the difference. That's what that man has spent his entire life doing, looking at computer-generated images. So you're back into Fantasyland.
Magic stuff. Oh, it's wonderful.
What Robert and I were looking at in this particular video are shadow lengths and direction. And what you have here is an astronaut, and the shadow length is here, and you see the shadow length here. When you're up on the hillside, though, the shadow length doesn't get any longer, even though the angle of the ground has changed. And if you look at this, this is actually a background mat. This is as far as it is. And we're going to make that a little more apparent. And then it come on a little bit more, and now the shadow length is going another direction. And don't forget, the camera is mounted on the rover. This is Apollo 16, and the rover doesn't move.
By the way, this was sent by a subscriber, Stephen Doherty.
Oh, thanks,
Yeah.
Steve. Yep.
Now you're looking at the shadow lengths here of him, but on the hillside, these shadow lengths aren't any longer. And it's a hill. The shadow length should be much longer on the hillside, even from a short one. Pay attention to the shadow, and then you come across where the footprints are, and now the shadow's being straightened out. Now it's starting to head this direction.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Which means the light source is very, very close. You're looking here at the shadow coming across. Now look at the shadow on this rock. It's now a different direction. Now, back here, what appears to be a crater. This rock is sitting right at the top edge of it. So the shadow should actually be going down the hill. You shouldn't even see it.
Yep.
Because it's sitting at the top. This is a background mat, and the shadow is up on the background mat. If that was actually the shadow shooting across, and this would be 3 or 4 miles across this crater, that's halfway across the crater then. So you couldn't possibly see a shadow on a rock halfway across a crater. So this is the background. You can see it right there. And that is the shadow up against the background matting.
If that rock is on this side of the crater, which it appears to be, beyond it is very indistinct background.
But it's projecting what should be miles across a very large crater.
The rock is projecting the shadow onto the wall.
Like they ran around just the backside of that rock.
Yeah.
And that's as far as they went. And then there's the line where everything's just fuzzed out. You're seeing the shadow angle changing here because the light source is very, very close. And of course,
right to the astronaut. Now watch this. This shadow's going the opposite way.
yeah, and there's the shadow,
Yeah.
right? And they can say the ground is angled one way or the other, but you can physically see it on the astronaut suit as well. And the camera operator is trying to point something out because that's really strange up on top of there. The astronaut here is going to be scooping up a so-called soil sample right there.
Yeah.
And when you pull that down in slow motion, he picked up a golf ball. When he pulls it up, it's pure white.
The sun's on his back now. You should see the sun in his visor.
Well, when he was coming down the other direction, it was almost directly behind him, and now it's coming from the side.
Yeah.
And that's because the light source is that close. And right there again, you see that so clearly right in there.
Just bleeds right onto the screen in the back.
Like that's a hill going down into a very large crater. That's what it appears to be, or that's what they were trying to impress you to have when the shadow is actually up against the background matting.
If that is a crater, there should be shadows of rocks on the other side, because we've got rocks on this side.
See, and then when it pans back over here, the lighting again is now coming down this side. This is pretty fuzzy.
Yeah.
But if that's a hillside, then these shadow lengths of these rocks should be a whole lot longer. Even that rock, right, is a fair length on it.
Yeah.
These don't get any bigger coming down the hillside.
Well, also the rock should be a lot bigger if it's that far away. I mean, if we told it 2 to 3 miles in diameter, you know, there's a little crater here which is not that big.
Well, there's down into a crater. Why wouldn't that shadow length up in here be a lot longer than these ones here? that are on flat ground.
Well, exactly. Because when they landed, we were told that they landed with the sun at a very low angle, so you get good shadow length or good shadow definition.
But you're going to also start seeing the hot spot as they pan across, because the lighting is more concentrated. You can see it's more concentrated in there. That's just one of the videos. I mean, the quality of the videos are lacking very much, but you can't get away from the direction of the lighting that's being portrayed here, from one side to the other.
Apollo 17, now it's the same thing. You know, on one side, the shadows are super long, and then on the other side, they're little short shadows. Now, let's take that and we're going to just pan over.
That's Harrison Schmitt. Look at all the way up his leg there. Looks like he's got like a dirty sock over top of it all the way up. It's very, very narrow at the bottom. And those suits are quite bulky over the ankle.
They're also pressurized as well.
Yeah, but it's from the knee down on his suit. See how skinny the knee? It's almost like he stepped in a mud puddle up to his knee.
Well, if only he stepped in something, we'll say that that is just lunar dust adhering to it.
It's so narrow though, right at the bottom. It looks like he just has a pair of boots on with a sock going out.
Yeah, it does. That's what it looks like. Not a pressurized spacesuit with 27 layers in it or something like that.
Just a few seconds before that, it's a full suit coming down. And then it goes to this. That just can't be. You can't have a suit change that much while they're doing this activity. So they must have taken a break or something while they were shooting it and then come back. Because there's nothing around there that would cause that. It's not like there was... And then this particular shot right here. Watch the tool he's using. Now watch it come back in again. He puts that right inside. Whatever that is, that's a piece of metal, domed or whatever. He put the tool right inside because that so-called rock is hollow. See, it's all the way inside of it? And watch when he pulls it out. There it is in, and there he brought it out. Absolutely hollow. And you can see that it's a piece of metal. The thing is the astronauts are pointing it out. And here we come back. Who are the whistleblowers? These guys were. You can't say that's not intentional. He stuck that in there. You'd never find a structure that is shaped like that. You can see the detail that's on that. But he puts that tool all the way in there. He puts about 50 inches of that thing up inside and then pulls it all the way to the top to show you that it's completely hollow. They actually were the whistleblowers. All of the stuff they were doing, just jumping around and falling down, things that you wouldn't possibly do if you were in that situation because it would be far too dangerous. This is a continuous video, 3 or 4 minutes long, right? Okay. There's the shadow lengths right there. And then when they walk around to the other side of the rover, the shadow lengths are 3 times. So they must have taken a break.
Well, that's also why that book by Mary Bennett and David Percy, Dark Moon, is subtitled Apollo and the Whistleblowers. Because there were plenty of people who weren't going to go public with it, who were prepared to indicate in the record, and this is the record, the alleged filming of Apollo 17 on the lunar surface, pointing out the various anomalies that we should look for. They were doing it very subtly.
But not so subtly once you realize what they're doing.
Yeah, once you know what to look for, you can see it all over the place.
And it is everywhere. Filming on Earth, and you're actually out in natural sunlight, those shadow lengths are going to change. And I mean, if you stop and have lunch or reset or whatever, by the time you get these guys back in the suit and shooting there, the shadow lengths is going to be quite different on Earth. And that's exactly what you're seeing. That's at least 3 times the length of the astronaut. That shadow is more than 15 feet long, and the other one is less than 6 feet, right there. And I don't care whether it goes down a little hill or not, either one of them, but if you watch that video, those shadows do not have any length to them. And you can see the angle that the sun is at the same time.
Magic stuff. Oh, it's wonderful.
This unstable warp field, he started off right here, saying he shows it to his students and they laughed and all kinds of stuff like that, right? So he's the one that started this. So we invited him on. And here he is commenting here, and we said, have a Skype chat. This guy is a high school physics teacher.
Right.
So here he's just making a joke and making a joke. And I came down and I said, well, he's living in a third world country. For a high school diploma is the equivalent of a grade 3 by the rest of the world, right? So I invited him to come on. Right here, I said, Warfield should come on and show us how it's done. And I said, I can set it up with both you and I, and it should be easier for a teacher to explain it to us, how it all happened. Then he comes down and he starts making an excuse here, saying it's impossible to debate a conspiracy theorist. And then he claims that he's done it hundreds of times. So Robert came on and offered him $500 US to come on and have a chat with us, right? And then he finally comes down and has, I have no interest in being on a Skype call with people halfway across the world. Well, why does the distance? Skype brings us together. What kind of an excuse is that? The distance, that we live away from each other. And then he said, frankly, not even worth debating, if you want my honest opinion. He spelled honest wrong. We put the ball in his court. Basically, he said, no, it's not my court. There's no need for action on my side. I'm not the one making the preposterous claims. Well, he, in fact, made the preposterous claim that they landed on the moon. I know he'll be watching these videos, because we're going to send him a link to it to make sure he watches the video. He can sit there, and if he doesn't want to debate it with you or I, then we will show him what kind of a truly closed-minded idiot he really is.
It's also probably because he doesn't have enough information.
As a teacher, he should be encouraging his students to look at it closely. Then they can make up their own mind.
Oh, no, that's dangerous to do that. You can't make up your own mind. You've got to be told what to think.
Yes, they're being programmed. The same students in the U.S. are being programmed in the national economy, and that's why when they grow up and get in there, they can't balance the budget. I mean, somebody's got to be able to figure it out and say, how can we correct this stuff? But no, they don't teach that. So Robert replied to him here. He says, because you do not possess enough knowledge on the subject matter, right? And this guy's a physics teacher for a high school, right? And it goes back to the fact that if you can, you do, and if you can't, you teach, right? And of course, here's your email conversation with Rick Feinberg.
That's a good one, that.
And of course, we'll just go right down through this, where he starts making comments.
Basically, I started off being polite, asking him for some time for his expertise. He's the press officer, I believe it is. I don't know if he's retired now, but he was at the time the press officer of the American Astronomical Society. So I made a reasonable assumption that he was knowledgeable about matters to do with space, because he had by that time posted his refutation of the Apollo hoax. He explained why there are no stars in the sky, and he explained why there was no waving flag on the moon, all of which has been debated for the last 40 years, and the agreement is that there are no stars in the photographs because the photographic film used, the Kodak Ektachrome film, couldn't pick up the small amount of light from the stars when he was being exposed for a directly illuminated astronaut on the lunar surface, allegedly. So I assumed he would know about these things. And his first question after I'd contacted him was, are you writing an article? Presumably in the same line that he was suggesting. And I said, no, I've already co-authored a book called The Apollo Moon Hoax, The Real Evidence. We go. The Apollo Moon Hoax, The Real Evidence, along with Trevor Weaver, which answers all his questions.
And of course, he hasn't read that.
Oh, no, he spotted it on Amazon. Obviously, he decided to check out what I was saying. Promptly said, I have no interest in a discussion with you. Oh dear, I thought. How sad. Because maybe he could be the person who would provide me with that piece of evidence that would demonstrate that I was wrong when I said that no humans have landed on the lunar surface. I've been asking that question for 25 years and nobody's come up with the answer yet. What's interesting is today, as we speak, I noticed that the SLS, the Space Launch System rocket, has had its launch scrubbed because it had a leaking hydrogen pipe. So they may even have to take it all the way back to the vehicle assembly building, that huge great building in Florida, and change the engine. Oh dear, you'd think they'd work that one out by now, wouldn't you? But no, they've had 25 years to do it, and they haven't managed it. So no Space Launch System today. No launch today. Maybe Friday if we're lucky. If not, next month. Late September. So I was hoping that Rick Feinberg could provide me with the definitive evidence for Apollo being for real. I mean, I genuinely want to find it because I would like to believe that humans have walked on the lunar surface. And that was what I was asking him. And he basically said he had no interest in discussing it, presumably thinking that he wouldn't lower himself to the level of somebody who disputed one of America's great technological achievements. Well, that was 50 years ago, and they still haven't repeated it, and as of today, they're not about to repeat it now. Maybe they'll get the rocket off the ground eventually, but it doesn't look good. So it went backwards and forwards like that, and I was being polite, as I usually am when I'm discussing these matters. I wasn't prepared to allow him to sidetrack me, because he then referred me to an article in Nature, which is all about the oxygen isotopes in moon rocks compared to oxygen isotopes in similar Earth rocks. And they're virtually the same. But seeing as the article in Nature would have required me to pay $32 to read it, I thought, well, maybe he's read it. That's why he referred me to it. No, he hadn't read it. He wasn't willing to pay the $32 either. I don't know why he sent it to me, because it didn't get anywhere. It didn't prove anything. As we all know that oxygen isotopes are highly technical things to identify, and we've discovered that the moon rock and Earth rocks are virtually the same oxygen isotopes. So what? Makes no difference. So he then decided to include the Mythbusters program as being presumably definitive proof that Apollo was real, because this was a Mythbusters program where Adam and Jamie went capering off to the McDonald Observatory to watch a laser being fired at the reflectors on the lunar surface. And they were jumping around with glee at the fact that they got a response back on their equipment. Sudden spike. Adam was jumping about, excited. Oh look, I got it. What he totally failed to appreciate, and certainly didn't describe in the Mythbusters film, was that it's not an instant reaction. When you fire a laser at the moon, there's a lot of photons of light that have to be recorded by an antenna on Earth, a big dish on Earth, and it takes about 8 hours to record sufficient photons being reflected back from the moon to have enough to record a signal. That wasn't explained in the Mythbusters film. And what was also not explained was that you don't need a reflector on the lunar surface to reflect a laser back. That had been done about 7 years earlier by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology when they fired a laser at the moon. No reflectors there then, and got a reading back. That was 1962. The Soviets did the same thing the following year from the Crimea Astrophysical Laboratory. So quite why Rick Feinberg thought that this was a convincing piece of evidence, I don't know, because it's not. Possibly he didn't have enough information to be able to come to the conclusion that I came to, having researched it in a reasonable amount of detail, that you don't need a reflector on the lunar surface to get a reflection back. So that is not proof of anything, other than that Adam and Jamie, in their Mythbusters show, and they've already said it is not science, it's entertainment. So to use the Mythbusters show as some sort of proof is dereliction of duty, in my view.
Well, considering he should have resources available to him through NASA, being that he's working there, he should have used something that had some credibility to it.
Well, exactly. And you make the point that I was trying to find, was that he must have enough connections with high-level scientists to do with Apollo, because he's prepared to go public about it, to refute what I say, and if necessary to make me look a complete idiot. But no, he didn't. When I asked him various questions about it and made various points about the Mythbusters show not being really relevant to the discussion, he disappeared. Sorry, which is standard reply. Sorry, gotta go. which is his way of telling me to get lost, I think.
You would think that a man who has worked a very so-called successful career in the space industry, who has availability, all of the highest tech equipment, access to all of the files and documents available, that he would take the time to pull out the documents and show clearly that these things had happened. When in actual fact, all he's looking through is a telescope that's running through and giving him a computer-generated image. And it's the software that creates that image. It's not like in the old days where you look through a telescope and you're actually looking at what is coming through that lens. And you can make that into anything you want. Whatever light source is coming through there, or radio telescope, or whatever else you're using, right, is being created into an image that is pleasing to the eye and to the public. It has nothing to do with actually what's being picked up out there. And they're involved in it, and of course they teach the next generation, like he's now retired, right? He's taught the next generation exactly that, and they've never seen a true image coming through anything because all of it is computer generated today.
Magic stuff. Oh, it's wonderful. Wonderful.